Just while my team gets mic'd up, I'll say a few introductory words. Thanks, Michael. Last session of the day before drinks. Try and stay awake. This will be an interesting session. It's a very important session. The CRC was born from growers and grower groups, developing the milestones and outcomes for this CRC. So without growers and grower groups, we wouldn't have this CRC. But the CRC is now 5 years in. The next 5 years, it's still going to be a lot of research, obviously, priorities, but we will be angled towards adoption. And one of the best ways you can get adoption is to work directly through the grower groups who've got, you know, they work directly with farmers. The whole reason for being for grower groups is to service their members. They're all 100% growers who care for their land. So I think it's very important for you guys to, particularly the researchers in this room, is to understand where these guys are coming from. You heard a bit about it earlier on, but every single group acts differently. They've got different sort of funding models, but we all have the same output, and that's caring for the farmers. So when researchers approach these guys with projects, keep in mind that they're running businesses as well, but you know, the fastest way to get adoption. So with us today, we have four groups from around Australia. So we have Catherine Marriott from Riverine Plains, Rob Milla from the Burdekin Productivity Services, and then Kelly Angel from Burdekin Cropping Group, and Nathan, I think people know Nathan, the West Midlands Group. And they'll be, I'll give them a couple of minutes just to introduce yourselves, and then we'll open up to questions. I've got a few pre-prepared questions in case you guys are getting a bit tired. So I'll probably open up with Catherine.
Surprise!
Okay.
I thought I'd get a bit of a break. So my name's Catherine Marriott. I'm the CEO of Riverine Plains, which is a farming systems group that's cross-jurisdictional. So we sit, we've got 660 members that sit between Wagga in New South Wales and Nagambie in Victoria. So we recently, I guess, the morphology of our group has changed to be a more contemporary farming systems group. And by that, I mean we've changed our business model from being an organisation that largely relied on grant funding from solely the grains and soils sector to an organisation that's much more commercial and therefore can be much more relevant to our members. So I guess we found ourselves at a juxtaposition where we're a member-based organisation, but we were constantly looking this way to chase grants to keep the doors open. So what I've tried to do is actually revolutionise that and put the focus right back on our members, which is what we exist for, finding out what it is that they're after, what are the gaps, the pain points within their businesses, and then finding partners who want to co-design and co-fund projects for and with us. We have I guess we've moved from being a largely production-based organisation to also looking at things that will de-risk the industry for our members. So what I mean by that is looking at international trends, looking at where policies may be changing so that we're investing in research that's actually going to de-risk our members' businesses. So that they're not left flat-footed, where my experience, just to give some context, was in the live export industry, and our industry was caught flat-footed. So it's really important that we're looking for where are the next policy changes, where are our consumers coming from. You know, there's lots of changes happening in the EU, and so that we're preparing our members to be ready for those changes. We've developed a new research matrix, so we have never done anything in the livestock space until very recently. So we've got sort of three pillars that we do research in, so grains, soils and livestock. And then every project that we do, we put it through sort of a lens of whether or not it's got a capacity building arm. Does it address climate? Is it production focused? Is it economic focused? Is it environmentally focused? So that we can build the most well-rounded, high impact projects for our members, because ultimately if we're doing a project and it doesn't build prosperity in our members, we've really got no right to be doing it. That'll do for now. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, Rob.
Yep, Rob Milla. So I'm the manager of Burdekin Productivity Services. So we're in the Burdekin area, which is about an hour south of Townsville. So right up in North Queensland, and also sugarcane is our crop, and Lawrence de Bella, he's an hour north of Townsville in the Ingham or Herbert region. So we operate a fairly different farming system to a lot of what we've heard about here locally in South Australia. First thing is the climate's actually livable in winter. Look, so our total area is 80,000 hectares in the Burdekin, or like the lower Burdekin, the sugar cane district, and it's fully irrigated. And in that 80,000 hectares, we have 530 farmers. So, you know, a large farm is 400 hectares, whereas that's some of you guys' paddocks. So it's very intensive. We're fully irrigated, so that makes quite a big difference. And we get about a metre of rainfall a year, and then put you know, around that again on as irrigation. The other thing that's quite different from us is that we're a regulated environment in terms of the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus that we can apply. So that's been imposed by the Queensland government over the last 10 years. And has probably caused myself and Lawrence and everyone else in the sugar industry, you know, to lose my hair and heaps of stress, because it's just such a polarising issue. You know, when someone is told what to do, they want to find a way around it, and so it's really difficult and challenging for our growers in that environment, and it also pushes them away from science a bit, because the policy makers have said this is embedded in science, and therefore some of the growers think that therefore all science is bad because you're telling me what to do and how to run my farm. So that's a challenge, but we will keep moving on. The other thing that maybe is slightly different from us is that our organisation, we're funded by grower levies, but also the sugar mill contributes to us, so the processor does, as well as some external funding. Like we're involved in about 5 of the CRC projects. The funding we get is quite minor, like $3,000 to $5,000 a year per project. So. But it actually contributes to our strategic plan. We've got a very clear strategic plan. We don't go looking for money. We go looking for opportunities that align with our strategic plan, and it's really good that the CRC actually provides some of those opportunities. So I can probably talk about the projects a bit later. Probably our key strength too is because we're such a small area, relatively speaking, and we've got about 12 staff, is the amount of contact we have with our grower members. So we probably see each of those growers at the very least twice a year, face to face, and many of them, you know, 5, 10, 12 times per year. So we've got a lot of grower contact, and from that comes a fair bit of trust and engagement. So that in itself provides lots of opportunity.
Yep, and Kelly?
Yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, Kelly Angel, I'm a Senior Research Officer or an Extension Officer with Burdekin Cropping Group. Often you mention Burdekin and people start asking where's that and how do you spell it. If you want good vanilla slice, that's where you've got to be. Champions there. In terms of Burdekin Cropping Group, it is a traditional grower group in the way it's sort of structured. We've got 400 family business members that contribute a fee that allows us to do the creative stuff and be quite relevant to what they want to, you know, see what their challenges are. But we also have some of the more traditional funding streams that we chase, but try and stay true to what our mission statement is, and that's about improving the prosperity of Australian grain growers or farmers through applied science-based research and extension. So GRDC, the soil CRC are probably 2 key funding streams, but we also try to diversify a bit on that and make sure that we're, you know, looking at things that are opportunities for community-based learnings as well. So a bit of philanthropic work, Future Drought Fund is certainly something that we're working with. So trying to make sure that we're not just focused on production on farm, but communities, as we know in small areas, need a lot of support, and that's certainly no different for us. In terms of the way that the group got started, we've heard a few birthdays for grower groups coming up this year. Well, we're one of them as well. We're 30 years this year. And it started out with a group of growers, hence why we try to stay true to what they're after. Being inspired by going to Hartfield site group actually, and coming back and saying, we need something like this in our patch. We want to be progressive, we want to challenge our own systems, we want to start to do things that are a bit different. And from that, BCG evolved and saw a lot of things grown in that little footprint that we initially operated that never were grown there before. So canola started to come into the mallee, probably has disappeared more recently too, but yeah, rainfall a big driver there. But yeah, crops like that coming in and seeing growers really push their systems and challenge what they're doing and be quite progressive with the approach they take. That's certainly no different today. I've been there for nearly a third of the time that BCG's existed, and it's certainly something we always look to strive to deliver against what the growers' challenges and needs are. Probably one thing that seems to happen a bit more now is I think research always used to be progressive and on the front foot, and in some cases that's still true, but I think our farmers are challenging us a bit more to push the system themselves, and sometimes we get caught in playing catch up. So that conversation with our grower base is certainly important to make sure we're not falling behind in what we're doing.
No, thanks, Kelly. And Nathan?
Cool, yep. So in terms of what does West Midlands do, I ask that every day. So I'll try and answer that. I think in terms of where we're heading, I know where we're heading, and when I get there, probably sounds like Catherine will be there as well. We're really trying to develop and build a new business model that allows us to deliver really good project outcomes. And one of the key things we see as driving that is the use of kind of diverse collaborative relationships and partnerships, that we can bring a whole lot of experience and skills to the table when we both design the projects, but more importantly when we deliver them. And that's a key thing that I see break down a lot, and it's probably because it is hard, to actually maintain that spirit of collaboration all the way through, and to trust all of these partners that come from a whole spectrum, if it's a diverse group, to actually deliver some really good project outcomes. So what we've done as an organisation, we've kind of been building capacity over the last few years. We've got 7 staff on now, and we work across cropping, livestock and pastures, and trying to have a balance of projects between them. We have 3 project officers, but probably more importantly, we have 2 communications officers. And really the role, and that kind of shows our focus, and I guess acknowledges the need for really good, strong communication with any projects. And it's probably something we haven't done well in the past, but really picking up the pace now.
Oh, good, thanks guys. Well, a couple of questions for the panel. You talked about, I think Nathan, a good segue about project development, and probably a business model for most grower groups, like WANTFA, for example, is about 60-70% project funded, and changing business models that varies between year and year. So, but for the panel, what stage of a project would you like to be involved with, particularly from a soil CRC perspective, when the researchers are coming up with ideas about projects, applied projects in the field? At what stage, a bit of a leading question, but what stage would you like to be involved? So, Rob?
Yeah, look, from the start, really, we're involved in a range of the CRC projects, and I suppose the benefit of, particularly if it's, I'll pick on maybe Marcus's project, where he's developing a tool like the Smart Shovel. Okay, so there was questions at the very first project meeting about how would you, as an end user and a person that engages farmers, envisage this tool, and what would you use it for? So to me, that's good management and good utilisation of all the resources that are part of the CRC. So I think that's really, really important that we're engaged to make sure that the solution that's being provided is actually providing a useful solution to a real problem.
Yep. Catherine?
Yeah, I would agree completely right at the start. Concept stage, farming systems groups are really important in, relevance checking any idea that you have. And I think historically, potentially, we've underutilised the resources that we have in the research world. And what I mean by that is the intellectual as well as the experiential resources that we have. And the farming systems groups, all of them here in the room, have got really close connections with farmers that are experienced. So they'll be able to tell you pretty quickly whether or not something that you're thinking about is going to be taken up. And my understanding of researchers is that there's nothing that brings you more pride than having the work that you're doing taken up and creating impact. and the earlier that we can be engaged to help you ensure that that's the case, the better off that we're all going to be. So that would be my 2 cents worth.
Kelly?
I think for the majority of projects, it's probably true to say that extension's an afterthought, and you know, we get the research and development done, and then we scrape the bottom of the barrel to try and find what's left to do extension, and that kind of is counterintuitive if you're trying to make real impact with growers and get them to adopt new practices, because if you take the reverse thinking, most of the effort needs to go into communicating that with them and showing them how to do it and making sure they do it well, and fostering that adoption, because you can't just tell them a message once and see them take it up. It doesn't work like that. You look at the no-till movement, and you know, it was a trickle out, and then suddenly once a few of your pioneers took it, the peer-to-peer learning kicks in and everyone sort of gets on board. So I think it's really important that you start as early as you can at looking what your extension and your communication mechanisms might need to be for some of these projects, because it paves that way to make sure that the messaging is clear, that the target audience is well identified, that the things that they need to know are communicated well, and you're not blinding them with science and not giving them the stuff that they need to apply it on farm, because yeah, you've got to tailor your message, and it takes time to do that.
That's a good segue to my next question. So you can answer 2 questions in one. So I'll pass on to Nathan.
Yep. Yeah, and just want to add, you know, you got the start and the end of the project, but I kind of see the start of the project as the project starting. But it's kind of that pre-phase where you've got this crazy idea, where you're trying to think about, well, is this relevant? You know, right back at the start of that really seed stage to become involved, to come out and talk to grower groups. Helps to kind of, you know, might sort to point things in the right direction a lot quicker. One of the, and I guess the other approach that we take as well, that every year we have a number of trials that are focused on new novel stuff, and I think technically internally it's called Nathan's Crazy Ideas, but there's just a couple of trials where we do try something that could work, and if it does work, we get some pilot data, and then that allows us to develop a stronger project, because we've got a bit of an inkling that this crazy idea could work. And so just being able to engage at that, you know, really early on, I think is really critical.
Yeah, because the next question is, when like you are designing an applied research project, what sort of percentage of that resources would you, for money-wise and time-wise, would you allocate to that extension? So when we're starting from the scratch, talking to researchers, they tend to think all the money needs to be research, but what kind of allocation of that budget do you think we should be allocating to an extension?
You want a number out of this, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Look,
No, it might be hard to ask.
I suppose,
yeah.
you know, I can't speak on behalf of everyone, but like you mentioned at the start, a lot of us are not-for-profit organisations, so we're not actually out there to try and grab every cent that's available. I suppose the biggest thing we like to see is that our contribution is valued, and that our contribution goes beyond the life of the project, and often there's a lot of tweaking after it. And I suppose you've got 2 extremes. You could have a farmer group that might say, we'll provide all the extension at no cost to the project because we see value for our members. But then there's the potential from other aspects of the community that might be undervalued. And I've seen the other end of the scale where and no disrespect to any private consultants might be in the room, but in our industry we've got some private consultants that are very good at PR and attracting money for projects, but they're not actually delivering extension, they're delivering widgets. So grower in, tiny practice change, report onto it into some framework, grower out, never talk to them again. Whereas, you know, our business is all about long-lasting relationships, which is very different to consulting.
Yep. Anybody else want to make any comments about?
Yeah, I will. I think it's important that we actually reframe what extension is. So, you know, people think, in my experience, that extension is a couple of newsletters, some social media posts, a workshop and a field day. Tick, done. And usually in my experience, that's about 5 to 10% of a total research budget. But if we are actually wanting to convert our research into action, I think that we need to rethink the entire extension model, and it will depend on how expensive the research is. You can't put a rule on it, in my experience, but I'd like to see 30% maybe even 50 if I can be cheeky. Because for me, what I actually, like when I mention de-risking the change management process, which is what I think extension actually should be, it takes time. It takes running small farmer groups. It takes demonstrations. It takes working with individual farmers who are trying a new tech or a new thing. They go to a workshop or a wheeled day. It's been a big day. I finally got here. But they'll take it home. They'll try something. It doesn't work. They give up. So part of the extension model needs to be walking beside these people when things do go wrong so that they can slightly change something and they stay safe in that innovation space. And that's how we're going to get real uptake of the work that you're all doing, which is really valuable. So I'd like to see a lot more money going into extension because I think that's where the impact happens.
Yep. There we go. Can I add, from my perspective, +1 for most of what Catherine said, the value of a project and how much should go to who is like every answer in agriculture. It depends, and to me it depends on the project. The whole idea of developing this sort of collaborative project where everyone's at the table is about delivering what needs to be delivered. And so if the science is sure about it, everything's done, we're fully known, you probably don't need much science in that project and you need a lot of extension. But conversely, if there's a project where it's pretty novel sort of science, it's going to be science heavy. But I guess knowing that altogether that's going to come through and everyone's going to have their place and their part in getting what is research out to the farmers and get the adoption, and that's probably where we sit now at that year 5 of the CRC, where we're just starting to think, well, okay, how is it all going, and to get out there in the field.
Good. Last question before I open up to the audience. So please have your questions ready. Is that the first time ever we've had Nathan actually submit a project application to the CRC that's been approved, Grow Group led, and collaborating with Money Program 1, and successfully got that project. For the other groups, have you actually thought at the board or staff level about approaching the CRC and looking at their milestones and outcomes and proposing or pitching a project? Kelly?
Yeah, BCG hasn't taken that step at this stage. It's not that it wouldn't or couldn't, it's just the projects that we've looked to be involved in have been more a support role to this point. And we have taken more the research side of what's happened to this point in time. And I guess, agreeing with what Nathan's saying, depending on the type of project and the phase that it's in, our involvement will change based around that. We know we've got the capability and capacity to deliver research, development, extension, but depending on where that project's starting from is certainly going to tailor how you sort of position yourself within those projects and that sort of thing. And BCG has seen themselves up to this point as a good supporting partner for field-based trials, for sort of leveraging the information we got in terms of our grower database and that sort of thing. I think some of the work that Hannah-Beth is doing is a first step in extension, understanding what your grower base is motivated by, what their behaviours are, that sort of thing. It certainly shapes everything else that you can do from an extension program, because if you understand what makes them tick, you can deliver things that you really incite that strong practice change rather than just throwing things at them and hoping something sticks.
I'm going to be a bit embarrassed to answer this honestly, which is I didn't know I could. And there's a perception that there needs to be a co-investment, which is an equal, and I don't know whether that's true or not either, but I can guarantee you if it's available, I would, based on what I've heard this morning with all the research that's been done, there's lots of things that I think our members would be really interested in. So you'll hear from me, David.
For us, it's not something I've thought a lot about. And part of the reason is that probably in the intro where I said one of our key strengths is our relationships with our growers, and I think that's what we bring to the CRC. And maybe a really good recent example of that was we heard from Ruben this afternoon under Liang's project about the lab on the chip. So we had a project meeting a couple of months ago and they were talking about, oh, at some stage we need to get this out. And I said, right, we've got a field day in 6 weeks' time. I'd love you to come up. And so he did manage to go up, see Lawrence, come down to see ourselves. And from that, you know, it actually generated some really good discussion. These guys accepted some criticism from our staff, which was good. Like, that's part of the collaboration. And then that photo, you know, there was Jasmine holding the NutriBullet. It was something that I'd suggested in a Zoom meeting, and I really appreciate the fact that we're face to face, that could we do plant tissue, and it was discussed, and that was that. But, you know, when they were with us, Jasmine said, right, I'm going home, I'm getting my NutriBullet. We went out and cut some cane leaves, and we put it through the lab on a chip. And, you know, these guys were so excited, and I think it was the fact that we had researchers, staff, growers all together in the room. That generates ideas. That generates enthusiasm. We showed that the next day at the field days. The farmers are enthusiastic, and that's infectious, and it generates more ideas. So, you know, I actually see that's the best role we can play in the CRC, but it's not saying we'd never put an application in ourselves. Yep.
Good. I'm going to open up to the audience now. So, any questions? Over to the left there.
Yeah, sorry, I guess it's more of a comment, and I wonder whether we need to be far more creative and inventive in joining extension and adoption of practices and R&D. I mean, the conversation's been going as though they're parallel processes, and they're not. They're on different timescales. Absolutely, we need the extension, the communicators in research projects, but to expect to be able to map out an extension program when you don't even know the outcome of the research seems incredibly naive to me. So I think, why don't we have a process where you have the extension people engaged from the start? Absolutely. But they're developing an appropriate extension program which may be separately funded depending on the direction, the outcome of the research. You know, I'm involved in a project at the moment looking at P application, and I think our message is going to be, don't change what you're doing now. Yep. That's a much different extension program, and a cheaper one probably, than saying, dump all the P application gear you got now, take on board this whole new approach and move on to a brave new world. Predict that at the start wasn't possible. So let's absolutely embed the two, but not expect them to be parallel processes or funded under the same project necessarily.
That's a good comment. I've been thinking at the start of the CRC about having a separate program almost to train and develop communication specialists in soils that can work directly with the grower groups, either embedded within the grower group or, you know, as a group of scientists that can go out and communicate that really well. It's worked really well with herbicide resistance around Australia and other programs, but yeah. And so comments first?
Yeah, I'd just probably, that's something, Nigel, that rolls around in my head a lot. You know, where should we become involved, and where should extension and research meet and join together or be separate or whatever? But one of the big things about working with farmers is that if you don't hit the mark, they remember and they don't forgive. And so if you put something out to them that's going to be the next greatest thing, they'll can it straight away, even if it is. They'd want to be really good. But, yeah, or if you give them a half-baked product, they won't take it up either, and they'll see that it's half-baked. So it's really when you get to something that they can actually tangibly use, then you can go with confidence to them and you know, work with them on the adoption side.
And probably another comment that, like, along the lines, the design of an extension program, it will be very dependent on what the project is, who the delivery person is, and who the target audience are. And don't think that as researchers you'll never be involved in that process, because we found it very powerful. You know, a facilitated session to bring a researcher along to the growers, that's really good. Right down to the other end of the scale, you know, one thing we found quite successful over the last 18 months has been, I just get my phone out, do a selfie video of my ugly mug, I make grammatical errors and I mumble, and it's all shaky, but I actually just upload that to YouTube and then SMS it out to every grower, and that's really, really well received. Like, they're seeing information 5 minutes after you've actually recorded it. So, you know, a program can be from that very cheap and easy scale right up to a proper facilitated workshop with the researchers.
Catherine Allen down.
Thanks. I was, just in responding to all the talk of extension, just a reminder that a lot of the work in Program 1 is probably trying to do what you're saying, Catherine, change our idea of extension around moving it from a very linear process to much more collaborative, cooperative, just like the CRC. So just a little plug there for the work that's happening in the knowledge sharing projects, in some of the work around different ways. David Falapale's work on, you know, getting you onto the front foot and leading, rather than sticking to our you know, what is it, about 100 years of extension theory. I think you're right. It's time to really start embracing new models of knowledge sharing. So it's great to hear that. Thanks.
Thanks, Catherine.
And
thanks. There's a bit of a segue into my question, I suppose, around bringing people into your group. And it's great that the Soil CRC is asking or encouraging researchers to collaborate with the farming systems groups. Back in the day, where we'd have to go cap in hand to government organisations and ask them to collaborate, you know, with you. They're coming to you, which is great. My question's around accessing trusted soil scientists and how you might go about that outside of the Soil CRC. I guess they're coming to you, so either before or outside of the Soil CRC. How you access or identified who those trusted soil scientists are, professional soil scientist advisors, about attending your events or asking to come and present. Like Nathan was saying, you don't want to miss the mark. You don't want to bring someone in who might be not with the messages that you want, or think that are along the lines that the farmers want to receive. And do you need any support in that area in regards to identifying trusted soil scientists to support your groups?
Yeah.
It's a really good... Oh, you go for it. Yeah.
I know groups like this, so having, the Soil CRC is a great way to build networks and understand where people work and that sort of thing. So for projects that might fit our remit in terms of what messages and that sort of thing we want to get out to our grower networks, a room full of people like-minded delivering against projects is certainly a great way for us to identify talent. There's plenty of it here, and we can get quite targeted with that. Outside of that, we're usually looking for our local specialists because they're conveniently located. They understand the farming system that we're working with and that sort of thing. So, you know, between collaborative work within projects or, you know, the knowledge base that we've got in our backyard, we usually look to make sure that we bring the right person to the group to communicate a particular topic. Our structure as a cropping group as well is, you know, we've got our staff that, you know, work on delivery. Some of them have some knowledge in particular areas, but it might not be as deep as a soil scientist or that sort of thing. But we also run advisory committees which help identify what we might want to know, and we also have a research committee that is basically the brains trust of our organisation, and their networks then are something we can leverage to identify people to speak to topics and that sort of thing. So I guess we don't feel like we're flying in the dark. We certainly have extensive networks through the people that we connect with and the way our businesses are structured.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Like Nathan said, you've got to be really careful that you never facilitate something that's really going to miss the mark, because once you've lost the audience you have. So I suppose in my experience, getting outside, and when I say outside I mean outside your local area or local industry, experience in works really well on a specific issue. So it might be herbicide resistance or particular use of this bit of machinery. But if it's a general farming systems thing, I think the researcher has to have either previous history with the industry or the local region to build that rapport with the growers. And so, yeah, I contact other researchers that I've known through past experience for those sort of issues.
Yeah, I would just add, coming to events like this is extraordinary because we get to meet you. And ultimately, if we're going to put you in front of our growers, we need to know that they're going to relate to you. And so about a month ago, Riv Plains ran a big conference, and I spoke with all of the speakers to make sure that their key messages were actually going to hit our audience. So I said to them, every one of them, I said, what's in it for our audience? And some of them were like, what? I'm going to talk about this. I was like, but what's our audience going to walk away with? Like, what are you going to make them think, feel, believe, or do? Because if you're not clear on that, I'm not going to give you an audience. Because that's where the value lies, right? And, you know, we're working with Terry Rose, and I'd ring him and be like, Terry, I need a human that's really smart and can communicate, help me out. So, you know, it's, hey, Terry.
That's not Terry.
Bit of a shout out.
That's not Terry.
Bit of a shout out. And he's an agronomist, I learnt, not a soil scientist today. But yeah, so that was, yeah, that's all I had to say about that, sorry.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
can I just butt in again?
Great question.
We don't want a researcher that just is coming to present to tick the box.
Yes.
Because there is nothing in it for the audience.
Yeah, and that's exactly the approach we take. The two questions we want them to answer is what, so, you know, what are they talking about, and so what? What's the grower going to do with it? So if you can't answer those two questions to the audience, they go home going, well, yeah, what did I put my time into that for? So, yeah.
And I guess from my perspective, the ability to communicate clearly, effectively, and put complex things into simple terms is a strength that everyone can utilise. I've got this really random way, really off-tap way of working out how to work out who we need to speak at a field day. We should ask our farmers. And you know, just ask them who they want to see, because they won't recommend someone who they don't trust. And so, yeah, and a lot of people are active nowadays on Twitter and through industry newsletters and things like that. So while you might think you might write an article and not get seen, or present somewhere and not get seen as a researcher, it is getting picked up. And so, yeah, I'll get 2 to 3 text messages and forwarded tweets, probably a fortnight. Some members are more active than others, saying, you know, you've got to get this person to speak at the Spring Field Day, or what about this? Have you got any trials on this? Or, you know, what's this crazy stuff? And yeah, that's what kind of guides us as well, or helps to validate. Yeah.
I haven't got a question, but I guess I got a comment that farmers are a really good, valuable resource. And grower groups, I see in what I do with SAGAT, and I wander around trials with scientists, they're sort of a link between the farmer and the scientist, and this is a three-way conversation. Farmers have got equal the amount of skills as what scientists have. They just got them in a different area. They've got to juggle all those pieces of knowledge. They've got to put them into a system and make them work to make money. That's their skill. Your skill as a scientist is looking very specifically at a very specific area, and you don't understand all those other juggling acts that a farmer has to do. So I think the grower group has got that ability to join those two together, and it's equally as important for the scientists to join and get to know what the challenges, a lot more of the broader challenges of a farmer, so they can be a better scientist, as it is to just be thinking, I've got a project and I've got to impart information back to the farmer.
Yeah, what we find that works particularly well if you do it is get the researcher to talk, and then the farmer is actually try giving this new technology a go to get up and speak after him, and mainly speak about his stuff-ups. But it's a good way of getting the message across, because farmers, you know, they learn from farmers mostly. They get some information from researchers, but they only adopt if they can see their neighbour doing it. So it's a good way. Got a question down here?
Yeah. My name's James Dyack from Soils for Life. We're a little bit like a grower group, but we have a national footprint rather than a particular region. And personally, I'm pretty excited that we seem to be seeing a refocus and resurgence on extension as a process, because we've had, 4 decades of funding cuts. And so I think that's something to be celebrated. I know that we've heard a lot of biophysical science today, which I think's amazing, but there's also important to recognise in my mind that the way people work together is a science and understanding the way people work. Social science is very important when it comes to adoption occurring, and I'm wondering if any of the panel would like to comment on how they are implicitly or perhaps even explicitly applying social science principles when they're doing their work.
I'll answer that a little bit. For us, it's more like social licence. It's like if we're kind of like the in-betweeners between the research and the farmers. If we can sort of filter that a little bit and then speak to our farmer members and our board members and then get them to acknowledge it's a good idea, that social licence of allowing, like we're a no-till group, now we do soil amelioration work. So we're basically massive tillage, but we do that for a reason. And we've heard through word of mouth that if we didn't do that, a lot of farmers wouldn't be doing the soil amelioration. So that sort of social licence is probably what we use. The adoption side of social thinking is a bit trickier and a bit more nuanced. And we're working with Catherine and Program 1 has been a big eye-opener for me. But I think we need a lot more work in that space. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, could you just, rephrase that question again? Are
there things that you're doing that could be described as social science that you're doing either implicitly because that's the way you think or explicitly because you've identified that those are important things for the way people work to cause adoption to occur?
Yep. And yeah, look, in our project that will be starting in a couple of months' time, that's kind of one of the things that's been bugging me for ages is, well, are we presenting the information in the right way so that farmers can make the most informed decision that they need? And so I think probably in terms of the way we approach or the way I'm kind of thinking about things now is really about the social side of, how do we connect and how do we communicate? Are we presenting the information the right way? Are we meeting their preferences for learning in the right format and through the right channels as well? So with our project going forward, to develop something that farmers can pick up and they can look at a new technology and they can understand fully what the impact's going to have in their business straight away, or by doing that rather than having to look through 3 or 4 or 5, trying to find the information to make that informed decision, we think is going to have a huge step up in being able to help engage a lot of farmers.
Right, I think we need to wrap up there. There's nothing like a sausage and a beer for social interaction. I think we're going a bit more upmarket, are we, Michael, tonight? So enjoy your food that's been made by or grown by farmers. I'd like to thank the panel. Been fantastic. Thank you.